ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome all of you, first of all, at Central European University. My name is Peter Balazs. I'm a professor of this school and the director of the Center of EU Neighborhood Studies. We have the big honor to welcome today the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Moldova, His Excellency Mr. Andrei Galbur, who has a brilliant career in diplomacy. He joined the ministry at a very young age after his studies of law, and he was mainly active on Europe and North America in the beginning, and then he had three positions abroad. All the three are of great importance. He started in Vienna as a first secretary, and then he was promoted. Then Washington, chargé d'affaires, and then another center of the world, the Russian Federation. So he has a very interesting combination of diplomatic experience from various sides of our multipolar world. Mr. Minister will speak us today about foreign policy priorities of the Republic of Moldova. We are looking forward to this great interest. I have to inform you that there will be a question time if the Minister agrees, but he has to leave for another obligation at 3 o'clock. So we have 1 hour time. Let's make the best use of it. Mr. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. It's indeed, hello everyone. It's indeed a great pleasure and honor to be in such a distinguished research institution, important for the region of Central Europe. I will focus in my presentation on the guidelines and the most pressing foreign policy priorities of the Republic of Moldova, and I will try to divide my presentation in 2 parts. Is it better like this? First, I would like to explain why the European integration continues to be a key foreign policy priority for Moldova, and secondly, I would like to explain the reasons why Moldova strongly advocates against the return of the dominance of brutal geopolitics in interstate relations. During the 25 years of our independence, and actually also this year we celebrate 25 years of diplomatic relations with Hungary. The foreign policy of Moldova was almost permanently in drifting mode. We had various storms. Some of them could have been avoided, some not, and some inevitably were drawing us into chaos both internally but also externally. Finally, I can say that today Moldova has found its path, finally, a map by which to orient itself in times of difficulty, in order to avoid losing sight of the most important national strategic goals, which are namely modernization and economic development. And here I would like to use the comparison, or I would actually like refer to the model that I refer to, and that is the European model of modernization and economic development. We have an association agreement concluded with the European Union in 2014, so this agreement and all the commitments that derive from this agreement are at the core of everything that the government does presently. I don't think anyone can argue against the fact that Moldova is by definition a European country, both geographically but also in cultural terms. And what we are trying to do right now is to make sure that we conform to the ideal of what it means to be European. And we have to do this first and foremost in our domestic affairs, but also in terms of our economic performance. I think for Moldova, more than for many other countries, the border between foreign policy and national modernization is barely visible. And the second is very much dependent on the first to a very high extent. In other words, European integration was never simple foreign policy priority for Moldova, but it was full-scale national modernization project. And I think it's fair to say that it was also a very rational and conscious choice of the majority of the Moldovan citizen, even in spite of the known division that still exists among the Moldovan population along geopolitical lines. And this rift, this geopolitical rift, Moldova, that is present on the European continent, Moldova does not find itself on either sides of this division line, but it actually runs straight through the country, and most importantly, it divides people on the level of mindset. At the same time, it is important, as I mentioned before, not to lose sight of the objective of modernizing and of implementing reforms, because in the long run they are aimed not at pleasing either Brussels or any other capital. It's also not aimed at increasing the divide or reaching conflictual instances with the East. It's aimed at improving the lifestyle, the quality of life of the population inside the country. And that is the objective in its essence. When this government has started its mandate in January of last year, we were still dealing with the effects of a very serious political crisis, but not just political, economic, and social crisis that had engulfed the countries for a few years. And the government mainly focused last year on stabilizing the situation in the country with two important objectives: restore the trust of our development partners, but most importantly to restore the trust on behalf of the population. It is also no secret that population lost trust in the EU integration objective, not because the European Union was not doing something right or because the European Union was promoting something wrong, but because representatives of the political class have mismanaged the country to the extent that they have covered themselves with this banner of European integration, at the same time conducted shady deals and were involved in fraudulent activities. So it was really the last chance for this political class to show that it's about a reform and not about statements. We had a very ambitious roadmap that we have negotiated and concluded with the European Union. We have accepted conditionalities on behalf of our partners. I'm very pleased to see Romanian Ambassador Lazurka here in the audience because Romania is one of our, besides being our neighbor, is also one of our key partners and always helped us. But even Romania made it very clear that in order to benefit from this help, we need to prove that we are serious about resuming the implementation of reforms. The achievements of that work have led to an agreement, a country program to be concluded with the International Monetary Fund, which paved the way for unfreezing important financial assistance for the country. And thus, this year, and the time that we have left until elections in 2018, in November 2018, we intend to use it to build on the achievements of last year. We don't have to invent any bicycles. We know exactly what has to be done. And as I said, the reforms that we have to implement are enshrined in the association agreement. We have all the necessary framework to make sure that we stay on course. It is also important to make sure that we reignite the spark inside the Moldovan society for the European model. It is very unfortunate that until now, the electoral choices of Moldovans are always guided by the geopolitical choice. Because I think the reason for that is that it's very difficult to explain to the people the benefits of reform. And when you try to explain to them the difference between the models of modernization, but it's very easy to pose them the question, you know, what do you want to vote for, Russia or Europe? And it's always easier for the citizen to answer that question rather than to focus on the real issue, and that is internal reform. Another important dimension is to continue to forge the partnerships that we have with countries in the European Union and to further develop them to help the Union, to help the member states, help us in achieving these objectives. Well, we have, I think, a very strong institutional relationship with the European Union. We also try to be very active in the framework of the Eastern Partnership. We take the partnership very seriously, and we know that Hungary, on a bilateral level, but also in the framework of the Visegrad Group, is an avid supporter of the Eastern Partnership and also a strong supporter of EU enlargement. We are also not naive, and we understand the realities of the moment that against the backdrop of Brexit and the increasing popularity of Euroscepticism inside the European Union, it's very difficult to ask for clear signals of eligibility for European integration. But at the same time, I think it's also important for the Union to make sure that although there are disagreements inside the family, the cohesion among the member states is there. Because I strongly believe that is the cohesion of EU member states that is the source of this light that lights the beacon towards which countries like Moldova are navigating. And this is a navigation through very turbulent geopolitical waters. There are some attempts to reduce the attention that is paid to the Eastern Partnership and to make it maybe a little bit more technical by removing from it the strategic political visionary approach. And I think it's important to always remember how the Eastern Partnership started. And there are certain fundamental pillars of it that should be preserved, including the political vision and the perspective for those Eastern partners that have very strong political integrationist ambitions. As I said, both culturally but also geographically, Europe is the natural home for Moldova. But despite the fact that Moldova seeks to align with the West, we don't have to be anti-Russian in the process. We always say that we are too small to be a player on the geopolitical stage, but at the same time we have to be intelligent as to make sure not to become a bargaining chip in the bigger theater. While we still have many difficult issues in our relationship with Moscow, I think last year we made significant steps in resuming the dialogue with Moscow based on a few realities. And the most important of these realities is the fact that Moldova has concluded an association agreement with the European Union with a deep and comprehensive free trade area component to it. This is a bilateral engagement between Moldova and Brussels, and this is precisely how we are going to pursue this relationship. Because there have been many attempts at trying to reopen this format with including Russia into the format and with trying to amend the substance and essence of this agreement. Russia remains important for many reasons, also because after the EU, it is the second largest trading partner for Moldova. We are still under a lot of restrictions in the sense of trade. But the most important element, the new element that we brought into the dialogue with Moscow is we stopped flirting with them. We stopped making promises that we cannot keep. And we stopped being embarrassed to talk about issues that are very difficult issues and where Russia is not behaving itself in a very pragmatic and constructive manner. What was also important is to do this in a very calm and non-hysterical manner to make sure that all channels of dialogue are open for communication. I think we've been quite successful last year in relaunching this dialogue based on this new realities. I can't say we've been able to solve many issues in the course of the year, but at least we reverted back to mechanisms of bilateral dialogue that were considered to be extinct for about 2 to 3 years. Let's not forget that from a security standpoint, Russia plays an extremely important role in the settlement of the Transnistrian issue, as it is part of the 5+2 negotiating platform, but also because it has unfulfilled international commitments when it comes to withdrawing its military troops and munitions illegally present on the territory of my country. What was important last year is that there was no meeting, and there were, I think, close to 20 meetings at the level of foreign ministries, co-chairs of intergovernmental commissions, the prime ministers, and including the level of the president. There was not one meeting where these very pressing issues were not mentioned. At every meeting, we made sure that we spoke about the positive dynamic, but also that we spoke about problems that require urgent attention. Also in this dialogue, we tried to show to our Russian partners that we see no contradiction between our agreements with the European Union and the free trade agreement that we have signed within the Commonwealth of Independent States. They're both based on the pillars of the WTO regulations. And although they made many claims that the effects of these agreements will be negative, in practice they didn't really, they weren't really able to present any meaningful arguments for these claims. Obviously, we also have a very important relationship with our neighbor to the east, our immediate neighbor to the east, which is Ukraine. And of course, what happens in eastern Ukraine is a source of great concern to us. But I think it's very important to keep in mind that there is no military solutions to issues like this. So all the efforts must be taken to make sure that the settlement is identified through political dialogues, through diplomatic means, keeping in mind first and foremost the population of the areas where the atrocities are taking place presently in Ukraine. I also think that in the case of the Transnistrian conflict, there are all the necessary ingredients to advance in the settlement process, as there are no elements of hostilities among the population. The Transnistrian issue is a strictly political issue that must be resolved exclusively in a political manner. I also think that Moldova would be a very good field of cooperation between the East and the West, an opportunity to identify solutions, not just create problems, but a platform for identifying solutions. While being small, we try to think global. As I said before, I think for a small country it's very important to try to have an intelligent foreign policy. That's why we invest a lot in building relationship with our partners. We appreciate the added value provided by the multilateral cooperation platforms, and we will do everything we can to try to be a predictable but also a reliable partner in international relations. So I will stop here and maybe open it up for interactive dialogue.
Thank you.